I was holding a foam check the size of a small door, $5 million in funding, 12 months of work, 2 panic attacks, and 100 sleepless nights when my phone buzzed. It was a text, just 6 words. "You're done here, don't come back." No name, no punctuation, just the digital equivalent of a slap to the face. And I was still on stage, under the lights, mid-sentence, the audience, full of donors, board members, reporters, cameras rolling. 1,000 eyes on me as my heart dropped into my stomach and my grip tightened around that ridiculous oversized check. I smiled, nodded, pretended I hadn't just been fired in front of everyone I ever proved myself to. And the worst part? No one else knew. Not yet, but they were about to. Before I tell you how the rest of that night unraveled, where are you tuning in from today? And more importantly, have you ever worked your heart out only to be pushed aside the second you became inconvenient? Leave a comment if this brought something up for you. Someone out there might need to hear that they're not the only one. It didn't start with the text, or the stage, or the sting of public humiliation. No, it started years ago, quietly. You see, I didn't walk into that job thinking I'd burn out. I walked in full of ideas, energy, hope. I believed in the mission. I still do. Helping underserved youth access arts education, that wasn't just a cause, it felt like a calling. In the early days, I said yes to everything. Weekend workshops, midnight budget rewrites, fixing the printer before a board meeting. I was the go-to person, not because I was loud, but because I followed through. Elliot, the executive director, used to smile and say, "I don't know how you do it, Harper. You're a machine." I laughed the first few times. After the 10th, it felt more like a warning than a compliment. Over time, I noticed the pattern. He'd take credit for grant proposals I wrote, schedule meetings I prepped, then breeze in late with that smug, effortless charm that somehow made donors lean in instead of lean away. Once, during a conference call with our biggest sponsor, I presented the entire initiative start to finish. Elliot muted his mic, typed me a private message, "Keep it short. You're sounding too academic." I swallowed my frustration, smiled through the screen, and kept talking softer this time, quieter. That's how it starts, doesn't it? You make yourself smaller so the room feels more comfortable. You tell yourself, they'll notice eventually. They didn't. Instead, I became the reliable one, the fixer, the ghost in the machine. And the more I gave, the more invisible I became. Still, I stayed. Because when the work matters, you tell yourself the rest is just noise. But the truth is, silence builds. It collects in corners. It starts to ache. And one day, it speaks. Sometimes all at once. I didn't know it then, but the moment it finally spoke wasn't far off. I decided I was going to leave. Not with a bang, not with a dramatic exit. Just quietly. It was a Tuesday night when I finally opened a blank document and started typing my resignation. The office was empty. The only sounds were the hum of the vending machine and the soft tap of my fingers on the keyboard. I kept it simple. No bitterness, no theatrics. Just, "Thank you for the opportunity. My last day will be the Friday following the summit." I didn't send it. Not yet. I wanted to finish strong. One last project, one last event. The annual Youth Impact Summit, our biggest fundraiser of the year. My fingerprints were on every detail. I designed the breakout sessions, hand-picked the panelists, and even triple-checked the seat assignments for our donors. That event meant something. Not for Elliot, not for the board, for the students, for the kids who showed up with sketchbooks and dreams. So I showed up too. Every morning that week, I arrived early, clipboard in hand, voice steady, smile in place. I juggled caterers, adjusted schedules, printed last-minute programs when the original batch got delivered with a typo in the headline, "Youth Impact." No one else caught it. Of course, people kept telling me I was amazing, a miracle worker, but not once did they ask if I was okay. That's what happens when you wear competence like armor. People stop seeing the weight underneath. I told no one about the resignation letter. Not even Nadia, our operations manager, who'd seen me cry once over a missing name badge and never brought it up again. I figured I'd slip out the following Monday, leave my keys in a labeled envelope, maybe even bake something for the staff lounge. Banana bread. Quiet goodbye, clean break. That was the plan. At least it was until someone else made a different one. 2 days before the summit, I got a text from Amelia Cho, Director of Partnerships at Houston Berg Foundation. Short. Professional. Hi Harper, quick walkthrough tomorrow at the venue. Would love your insight. 10 a.m. I almost said no, not because I didn't want to go, but because part of me had already started letting go. I'd boxed up hope, folded it neatly, and placed it next to my resignation draft, like a sweater I knew I wouldn't wear again. But something about the tone of her message felt different, so I showed up. The ballroom was quiet, still half-lit, cables on the floor, chairs in loose rows, half-finished flower arrangements waiting by the wall. I walked in with a clipboard and a half smile, expecting a simple logistics check, nothing more. But Amelia was already there, not alone. Beside her stood a man I didn't recognize. Youngish, sharp suit, calm eyes, the kind of calm that didn't need to prove anything. Harper, she said warmly, this is Theo Lang, Executive VP Houston Berg. He's flown in to get a feel for the space. Theo stepped forward, extended a hand. Nice to finally meet the person actually running things, he said. I blinked. Actually running things? We did a walkthrough together. Stage lighting, donor seating, camera angles. Theo asked questions, smart ones, and he listened, really listened when I answered. At one point, he turned to Amelia and said, "You know, this doesn't feel like an event. It feels like a movement. That's rare." Amelia just nodded. It's Harper. She makes it look effortless. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel invisible. I left that ballroom with something I hadn't carried in months, a flicker of possibility. I didn't know what it meant, not yet, but by the next night, everything would be different. The night of the summit, everything was running on time. That alone felt like a miracle. The lighting hit just right, soft gold on the curtains, deep blue on the stage. The slideshow was looping clean, the name tags were alphabetized, and someone had finally fixed the typo on the welcome banner. People were arriving in waves, donors in tailored suits, students in thrift store blazers. The photographer hovered near the dessert table, testing angles, and Amelia gave me a small nod from across the room, the kind that says, "You pulled it off." I stood near the wings, watching it all with my clipboard tucked tight to my chest like a shield. This was my final act. The quiet bow out. One more night of grace, then gone. Then came the buzz, a vibration against my palm. I glanced at my phone. It was a text. No name, no greeting. You're relieved of duty, effective immediately. HR will follow up. And then, for good measure, don't cause a scene. That was it. 12 words and a warning, sent during my own event. I stared at the screen. Everything in the room blurred just for a second. People were still clapping. The stage crew was still adjusting cables. No one knew that on a screen the size of my hand, my career had just been cut off like a loose thread. My heart was pounding, but my face didn't move. I tucked the phone behind the check, the massive ceremonial one. I was minutes away from presenting. I wasn't going to cry. I wasn't going to run. If they wanted silence, they'd get something else entirely. Because that moment right there, standing behind the curtain, holding $5 million in one hand and a gut punch in the other, that was the moment I realized something I hadn't dared admit until now. They didn't just underestimate me. They'd forgotten I could see the knife coming, and I wasn't planning to flinch. What happened next wasn't in their script. The lights dimmed. The string quartet eased into their set, a warm sweep of cello and piano that made everything feel elegant, intentional, like nothing could possibly go wrong. I walked onto the stage, giant check in hand, a polite smile carefully fastened to my face like jewelry I didn't choose. I could still feel the phone in my palm, still hear the words echoing in my head. You're relieved of duty, effective immediately. And yet, I kept walking, step by step. I reached the microphone, took one steady breath, and looked out at the crowd. 300 people, maybe more. Donors, students, faculty, board members. Theo was near the front with Amelia, both of them watching me closely, like they already sensed something was off. I lifted the check slightly, holding it with both hands now. My voice was calm, too calm. "Thank you all for being here tonight," I began. "Before we continue, I'd like to share something." There was a stillness in the room, the kind that only happens when people sense a shift before they know what's shifting. I raised my phone slowly, held it at eye level, and read, "You're relieved of duty. Effective immediately. HR will follow up. Don't cause a scene. No name, no title, just truth, hanging in the air like smoke." For a second, nothing happened. Then someone gasped. Somewhere near the back, a fork clattered to the floor, and from the front row, Theo stood. Didn't yell, didn't panic, just asked loud and clear, "Who sent that?" All eyes turned to the side of the stage where Elliot Baines stood, half-shadowed behind the curtain, his face pale, his shoulders stiff, his drink untouched. The room had stopped breathing, the kind of silence that always comes right before something breaks, and it did. Not loudly, not all at once, but the cracks had started forming. I stepped down from the stage, heels clicking against polished wood, and handed the check to Amelia. She looked at me, then at Elliot, then at the crowd, and the weight of what just happened began to ripple. It wasn't over, not even close. The earthquake had only just begun. I didn't sleep that night, not really. I changed out of my dress around 2 a.m., pulled on an old hoodie, and sat at my kitchen table with a cup of tea that went cold before I even touched it. I kept replaying the moment, the gasp, the silence, Theo's voice slicing through the ballroom like a wire pulled too tight. But more than that, I kept thinking about what would happen next, because I knew Elliot, I knew his patterns. He'd go quiet, then defensive, then vicious, and I needed to be ready. So I opened my laptop, created a folder, and labeled it simply Timeline. Inside, I started dragging in what I had, the emails he forwarded with my name cut out, the grant applications I'd written with his edits in bright red, changing words but not ideas, the budget spreadsheet I'd fixed after he accidentally deleted 2 months of numbers, the text from a donor where he referred to me as just our program scheduler. Each file was like a brick, cold, heavy, undeniable. This wasn't revenge, it was insurance. I wasn't looking to destroy anything, I just wanted to stop pretending I hadn't built it. By sunrise, I had 15 documents, 4 email chains, 2 screenshots, and 1 voice memo from a meeting where Elliot flat out took credit for the Houstonburg partnership. He hadn't even been on the first 3 calls. I backed it all up to a drive, then to another, and as I zipped up my jacket to head to work, yes, I still showed up, a new message lit up my phone. This time, it wasn't anonymous. It was from someone I didn't expect. Just one line. "I think it's time we talk. I have something you need to see." And suddenly, I wasn't the only one with receipts. By Wednesday, the air in the office felt heavier. No one said anything directly. No meetings were canceled, no announcements were made. But the energy had shifted. People spoke in whispers. Doors closed more quickly. Slack channels went quiet. I wasn't invited to the weekly debrief, which was strange, considering I'd led half the programming being discussed. Still, I kept my head down, showed up, answered emails, smiled when needed, but behind the scenes, things were cracking. On Thursday morning, I got a ping from Nadia, our operations manager, who never used exclamation points unless something was on fire. Her message just said, "You need to see this, now." Attached was a forwarded email. Houston Berg Foundation. Formal tone, clear language. They were suspending all funding pending internal leadership review. They'd copied the board, they'd copied legal, and quietly, they'd copied me. By noon, 2 more sponsors followed. Different names, same message. We're pausing future support until concerns are addressed. I didn't say a word, didn't tweet, didn't post, didn't leak a thing, because I didn't need to. The damage wasn't coming from me. It was coming from the rot they refused to see until now. Elliot, true to form, said nothing. Radio silence. The only thing he managed to do that day was lock me out of my email account and revoke access to shared drives. That was his move. Not denial. Erasure. By Friday morning, my name was gone from the staff page, like I'd never been there at all. But erasing someone doesn't undo what they built, and it definitely doesn't stop what's coming, because later that afternoon, I got another message. This time, it wasn't from a colleague. It was from someone on the board, and they weren't looking to defend Elliot. They were asking to meet, privately. And that's when I realized this wasn't just about me anymore. We met in a quiet corner booth at a cafe that smelled like cinnamon and caution. 3 board members, Vanessa Clark and June, all longtime supporters, all visibly nervous. They didn't waste time. Harper, Vanessa, began carefully folding her napkin. We've reviewed the footage from the summit, and we've seen the messages. Clark cleared his throat. We'd like to hear your version, candidly. I didn't flinch. I opened my laptop, navigated to the folder I'd labeled Timeline, and slid it across the table. No speeches, no dramatics. Just files, email threads, original project drafts, budget revisions, internal memos with Elliot's initials stamped over my work like he was rubber stamping his name onto my spine. They read in silence. Each page turned was another crack in their denial. June eventually looked up, eyes wide but steady. You kept all this. I nodded. Someone had to. There was no outrage, no excuses, just the slow, bitter realization that the structure they trusted had been built on someone else's effort and someone else's silence. And mine was done. By the time the meeting ended, they weren't asking if I had more. They were asking if I'd be willing to speak during the internal review. I said I'd consider it, depending on how they handled the next 48 hours. Later that evening, my phone lit up again. This time, it was Theo. Dinner, just us, no press. I want to run something by you. Something in my chest tightened. Not fear, not anger, but something closer to possibility. Because while the old house was crumbling, someone was offering blueprints to build something entirely new. And I wasn't just ready, I already had the design. The first time I checked the organization's website after the summit, it was out of habit. I wasn't looking for myself, not really. I just wanted to see if the recap photos had gone up. But as I scrolled, I noticed something. My name. Gone. No bio, no photo, no trace in the About Us section. Even the blog posts I'd written carefully crafted updates, reflection stories, had been quietly unpublished. It was like I had never worked there at all. No press release, no explanation, just silence. The kind that feels intentional. At first, I didn't react, just stared at the screen. A strange mix of numb and sharp, like the edge of a paper cut you didn't notice until someone poured lemon juice on it. Later that day, a courier dropped a thick manila envelope at my door. No return address. Inside, a cease and desist letter. Allegations of breach of non-disparagement, compromising internal communications, and my favorite, misrepresenting organizational leadership. I almost laughed. They hadn't called, they hadn't emailed. They hadn't even asked me to explain. They just tried to erase me, like deleting a name from a spreadsheet could undo years of late nights and cleanup duty. Like their reputation could survive on silence alone. But I wasn't angry, not anymore. Because the more they tried to bury the truth, the more obvious it became that the truth had roots. That night, I brewed a cup of tea I didn't drink, sat by the window, watched the streetlights flicker against the rain. And then my phone buzzed. Theo, we're ready to move forward. The team loved your proposal. Legal's drafting terms now. I stared at the screen for a long moment, not because I was surprised, but because I wasn't. They had tried to write me out. Meanwhile, someone else was writing me in, and this time, they were spelling my name right. I didn't announce anything right away. There was no press release, no post with polished headshots and hashtags. Just a quiet domain registration, a simple landing page, a name that felt like breath after a storm. Northbeam Initiative. We weren't a nonprofit yet, we didn't even have office space, but we had a vision, and that was more than I'd had in years. Theo and the Houstonburg team moved fast. Within 2 weeks, we had legal support, seed funding, and a list of partner schools who wanted to be part of something new, something built on transparency, not ego. And this time, I got to build it from the ground up. No borrowed credit, no stolen applause, just honest, stubborn work. I spent hours sketching out frameworks on my dining table, curriculum pathways, microgrant guidelines, community art exchanges. I didn't do it alone. I pulled in people I trusted, people who used to sit in the back of rooms and make the magic happen while others took the mic, people like me. The first staff meeting was in a borrowed co-working space with bad coffee and folding chairs. But we laughed, a real laugh, not the kind you swallow behind a forced smile. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel like I was surviving. I felt like I was building. That shift is quiet. It doesn't come with confetti, but it's real. It lives in the way your hands stop shaking when you speak. In the way no one questions your seat at the table because you built the damn table. Then one morning, my inbox lit up with a subject line I hadn't expected. Invitation State Arts Fund Annual Gala Keynote Speaker Confirmation. Attached was a seating chart, a podium schedule, and a confirmation that made me pause. Guest of honor, Harper Elwood. I hadn't stepped on that kind of stage since the night everything fell apart. But maybe it was time. Time to return not for revenge, but for something far bigger. The ballroom looked different this time. No soft uplighting to mask tension, no oversized checks, no tight smiles stretched over strained silence. Just people, real ones, artists, educators, students, folks who knew how to build something from scratch and weren't afraid of the mess in the process. I stood near the back for a moment, breathing it in. There was no panic, no clipboard, no fire to put out, only presence. Theo found me by the entrance. "You ready?" he asked. I nodded, not because I wasn't nervous, but because this time the nerves didn't feel like fear, they felt like momentum. They introduced me as the founder of Northbeam, but when I stepped on stage, I didn't lead with titles, I led with truth. Last year, I said I was fired in a room like this, silently, efficiently, and very, very publicly. But tonight, we're not here to bury the past. We're here to fund a future. The room didn't erupt in applause. It leaned in, and sometimes that's louder. I shared the new programs, the partnerships, the scholarships named after the students who taught me more than any CEO ever did. And when I stepped down, I didn't feel triumphant. I felt grounded, because this wasn't about revenge. It never really was. It was about rebuilding with intention, not from ashes, but from blueprints, ones they never saw coming because they never bothered to ask who drew them. I think people assume you have to burn bridges to prove a point, but sometimes all you need to do is build your own road, quietly, brick by brick, and let them notice when they find themselves walking on it. So here's what I've learned. You don't always get credit. You won't always get thanks. But when you build something real, something honest, it lasts, even if your name disappears for a while. And now I'm curious, if it were you up there, phone buzzing, spotlight burning, people watching, what would you have done? Let me know. I'll be reading.